Hi guys, I'm back. Figuring out how long you're supposed to keep different tax and accounting records is confusing for many of our clients and many of you wonderful viewers. Whether you keep paper or digital records or a mixture of both, you don't actually have to keep most of them forever. What is important to know is one, what are our government requirements in this instance? And two, where do I find something? This means you need to understand what's needed for your tax returns, how you can stay organized, and how you can get rid of records when they're no longer necessary. No one wants our office to be an episode of Hoarders. Join me in this, right? I'm kbunschoten, president and founder of Certum Solutions, a business technology firm here in North Carolina and also an elite QuickBooks solution provider. Thank you. And Intuit Trailblazer of the Year. In this video, I'm going to review some record keeping rules and best practices so you can leave feeling more confident about what to keep and what to shred. But before we jump in, make sure you hit the like button if you like this video. That will tell us you want more content like this. And subscribe above if you want to be alerted to new content that comes out. This isn't tax or legal advice, so make sure you consult with your appropriate advisors before you do anything big. You can also find links to relevant resources in the video description below, and while I don't always say make sure you read the description, I'm going to do that today because actually we'll have a link to the IRS website that goes more in depth on this topic. Also, make sure you double check on your state, because we can't cover all 50 states in this video, on what your personal requirements are at your state level as well. Let's Marie Kondo those business records. So what exactly do we need to keep? In general, we want to keep receipts, statements, and other documentation based on your tax year. And I find it very helpful to keep them separated by tax year. So as you're finishing up your Christmas stuff or your Hanukkah stuff or your other holiday stuff at the end of the year, take a moment and box up those records and put in your new files if you still keep paper records. And you can also do the digital equivalent. I personally keep a mix. If I get it in paper, I save it. However, I do scan all the paper I get to the cloud. We use OneDrive, and I keep digital versions of everything, as well as like a little digital perm file, which is where the really important stuff is that I need to keep. Locked down, secure, and the rest. Okay? The exact decision of what you need to keep and how long you need to keep it will depend on your business. But if you have questions about your specific business, reach out to us and we'll help you find answers, okay? IRS requirements for tax records, yes, they actually have regulations on that, apply broadly for small businesses. So I'm going to run through some of them. They're kind of intricate, so make sure that's when I want you to use the link because I may goof this up. But in most cases, tax records are kept 3 years from the filing deadline or the time that your taxes were actually filed and paid. And a super helpful feature in QuickBooks Online is the fact that you can actually attach documentation to every transaction in the system so that if you need it in the future for documentation purposes, you have it. If you switch softwares, make sure that you have an archive method to maintain the documentation you've saved, because after you pass that cancellation period and you're done, that all goes away. So it's very important to always think about our what we call source documents, okay? There's my little blurb. So the reason it's usually about 3 years, this is the time when tax returns can be amended, the IRS can assess additional taxes, and so on, okay? You want to keep them for 3 years if certain situations do not apply to you. What are those situations? You need to keep them for 6 years if you do not report income that you should have reported. Don't get up to that tomfoolery, people. And that income is more than 25% of the gross income that you had on your return. If you did not file a return, maintain those records indefinitely. We all know why, because you need to file a return as a business owner. Keep records indefinitely if you file a fraudulent return. We all know why there too. I don't need to go into more details. You need to keep records for 3 years from the date you filed this original return or 2 years from the date you paid the tax, whichever is later, if you file a claim for credit or a refund after you file the return. If you file a claim for a loss from worthless securities or a bad debt deduction, you want to keep those records for 7 years. You want to keep employment records for at least 4 years after the date that the tax becomes due or paid, whichever is later. And they love saying whichever is later. Also, use the link. because it's a lot easier to read it. Property records also have guidance from the IRS that you need to keep in mind. How long you keep these records has more to do with the period of limitations and when they expire for the year that you disposed of the property. According to the IRS, you must keep these records to figure out depreciation, amortization, and depletion deductions. You also need these records to determine gains and losses when you sell or dispose of the property. If you sell the property, you're going to have to report the sale on your next tax return, but make sure to bring any big transactions like that up with your tax accountant so you can avoid any issues with capital gains and so forth. Now that you have a better idea of how long to keep your records, let's get organized. And make sure that if you have any questions on certain documentation or what have you, or source documents, feel free to leave us a comment and we'll be happy to help. So, this is where we don't want to be hoarders. How do we organize this stuff? Especially now where we're in this quasi-physical / digital / everything else situation of the cloud and so forth. How you organize it is up to you. For the purposes of this video, we came up with a really simple solution that'll work for most people. But again, I like to set my files up the way I think, so feel free to revise this as needed. Popular file categories are operating expenses, invoices or revenue, clients and customers, which kind of tie in, payroll, capital expenses, and personal records, okay? There's other types of records that you may need to add or take away from there depending on your particular situation. Feel free to do so. Okay, getting into register receipts. I know we've all had that situation where we get a receipt at the gas station or that other thermal printer receipt and we have a paper copy of it somewhere and it gets really hot and you look at it and it's blank, right? That's no good. So for that purpose, I say if you have a thermal receipt, make sure you scan it in and attach it to the transaction using QuickBooks Online as soon as you incur or as soon as you spend that money. That way you don't have to worry about that, okay? Technology now makes digital record keeping easier and safer and saves those thermal receipts. That being said, what I usually do is I scan my stuff in and I also will save the physical copy as long as I need to. So you can typically get your digital receipts and paperless statements from your banks, credit cards, and other providers. And one thing you can also think of to do is make sure that you have a retention policy set up on your email so that if for some reason you can't find that receipt, most of us get email copies. You can also pull it from your email. Using the digital software options will save you trees, money, and the time it takes to shred those paper statements. As a final step, make sure you create a labeling system that lets you know when it's time to shred or delete your files. For me, I like to organize my files by year, except for my perm file, which is permanent, right? I call it my perm file, and that I know every year when I'm boxing up my yearly statements, do not touch this guy, okay? So don't use those cardboard banker boxes. They are so susceptible to getting wet or damaged. Make sure that if you have physical files that you use something plastic and waterproof because we never know when disaster is going to strike. And make sure you have it scanned in so you have a redundancy copy. Some people will say, well, if I scan it in, why do I have to keep the paper statement? That is up to you. For me personally, I like to be safe. So anyway, this way your files stay manageable, organized, and relevant. I hope these points help you become more organized, and thank you for putting up with me being hyper today. My best advice is to let Certum help you with your record-keeping questions as part of your bookkeeping engagement and save you some of that stress. We can't save all of it because we are remote, but we can help you keep up with everything. Even so, and also, if you think you have a silly question you'd like us to talk about, feel free to reach out because there are no silly questions when it comes to accounting and bookkeeping. There's a lot of detail out there, and we love to help you through it. Our goal is to get your books organized and ready for tax time and to help you spend less time sweating the small stuff. My humble brag is that our books were done in mid-January. First year ever, so I'm very excited about that. Anyway, the contact information for our team is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon and to hear from you. Thanks.